So, you brought up the microdosing thing. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
want to talk to you about that because I find that pretty interesting. I used to experiment with, you know, I mean, I've had my heyday with psychedelics back in the day, but I
sure.
would experiment with, low doses of LSD while going out in the mountains and just going
Yeah.
out on big training runs and stuff. Um, how big of a dose did you take and what, and did you re-up? Because it seems weird that you would take it at the beginning of the race rather than
Yeah.
maybe the end of the race.
Yeah, actually my initial plan was to take it that third day,
Mm-hmm.
to kind of like maybe even take a lot.
Yeah.
And I think it just sort of got lost in the shuffle and I was like so out of my mind anyways that like I was scared. I've never done that before. So I think pre-race I had talked about doing that, but when it actually came to that like third day, I was scared to introduce something that I had never tried before, and I didn't know how I was going to react to it.
Mm.
Now, typically, like you're right, like the super low doses, um, like you don't really feel high, you don't feel anything.
Yeah.
Like, and so when I'm doing it for like mental health reasons, like I take an amount that like I don't ever feel.
Mm-hmm.
You just catch yourself, like you'll catch yourself that night. Oh, like I'm in a good mood.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm enjoying myself. Like when was the last time I enjoyed myself
Yeah.
at like a family gathering or something? You
Totally.
know what I mean? And that's the only way you really know that you took anything.
Yeah.
Now occasionally when I head out to run, like if I'm going to go on like a 4 or 5 hour run, like I'll take like 2 or 3 times that and I will like feel it a little bit because I think that's really fun to just
Mm-hmm.
like, now again, you're not tripping,
Mm-hmm.
you're not like what people typically associate with mushrooms or LSD. Like you're not experiencing that, but you're experiencing colors, you're experiencing the landscape in a much more like vivid way. And for me, what mushrooms do is it it sort of allows me to stop being used to things. You know, I feel like when we become accustomed to things, like things sort of lose their magic a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But like the Grand Canyon's a really good example. Like I have friends that have grown up, 3 hours from the Grand Canyon and have never been there before. Because when you grow up next to something, or like when you're accustomed to something, you just get used to it and you
Yeah.
don't really appreciate it for what it is. Like mushrooms sort of allow me to like go run in Granite Mountain Wilderness, which I like live right next to, and I've grown up going there, to go there at like sunset and be like, this place is fucking amazing.
Yeah.
Like that's really cool. Like, and so for the race, again, to get back to the race, like I thought it'd definitely be fun to like, take a little bit more. So I sort of did that. I probably took, well, so for example, the typical dosage for like tripping with mushrooms is typically like an eighth of an ounce.
Mm-hmm.
With microdosing, you usually take like a tenth of that.
Mm-hmm.
And you do it like every few days, or people have different strategies. It's
Right.
sort of whatever works for you. But I probably took like a quarter of an eighth, I would say.
Okay.
So like a quarter of the amount. So yeah, I didn't take a lot, but I was definitely like feeling it out there and feeling
Mm-hmm.
good for like that hour, like 2 to 4 or
Mm-hmm.
something, like
Mm-hmm.
enjoying myself for sure.
Yeah.
But again, it got to the point where I didn't know how it would affect me later in the stages, and it just got to the point where like I wasn't willing to kind of do anything that I didn't have like supreme confidence in.
For sure.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
So did you end up re-upping later on in the race, or
I
was it
never
just in the
did.
never did? Okay.
Yeah, I never did.
Okay.
Just yeah,
Yeah. That's cool, man. I mean, they're UFC fighters. They all experiment with the same thing. When they go into fight, a lot of them are taking really low doses of mushrooms because they can
yeah.
almost read what their opponent's doing before they do it. It
I
gives
think
you
it adds a lot of clarity for sure.
clarity, like heightened
Yeah,
awareness.
yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, man.
And it allows you to be very objective. It's sort of like, so to, sort of tie in the mental health thing again, like, you know, things that people struggle with mental health, like I could like unload on you right now everything that makes me feel bad. You know what I mean? Or like everything that causes stress or everything that causes anxiety or depression. And you would hear those things and you would be empathetic towards those things, but you wouldn't feel those things the way I feel those things.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You would be
Right.
able to look at those things from a very objective standpoint and say, I understand why that causes you stress, but I don't feel stress because of that.
Right.
So for me, it almost allows me to that like hyper objectivity where like I can look at the things of my life and sort of create this like meta mic almost and like look at myself objectively and say like, yes, those things are like stressors,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm able to sort of just like put them over there for a minute
Yeah.
and not allow them to affect me the way that I would if they were like super internal.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost the opposite, I think, of what like a lot of people would think if you like took mushrooms. You know, they like have these ideas of these like psychedelic like trips or whatever. But like for me, it almost makes me like hyper rational and objective, and I'm able to like sort of compartmentalize my emotions a little better and just sort of deal with them instead of like deal with them in an objective, rational manner instead of an emotional, irrational manner.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's been a really big help.
Hmm.
And I'm also like, I'm not, I think, you know, I don't want to get too off topic here, but or go too far down the rabbit hole of like pharmaceuticals and things like that. But I've always been deathly afraid of, for-profit pharmaceutical companies
Mm-hmm.
and um, like mushrooms. I've never taken antidepressants. I've never dealt with any of sort of those chemical treatments. And so mushrooms for me, like they seem to really work. They're very low risk. There's zero side effects. There's zero consequences,
Yep.
and it seems like a no-brainer if it's making. And I've talked to a lot of people, and it's like, you and I would have never brought it up unless I brought it up, and it's like you start to find out like, oh, like you do that too, like, oh, you do that too, oh, you do that too, like it's a lot more prevalent than people realize, even
Totally.
out there like running on the trail. Like I was like running with Wit, and like I was like, dude, I was like, hey, I did a bunch of mushrooms, and he was like, oh, that's so awesome. And he started telling me all about his experiences with like all of that, and like, or like Dylan, the photographer. I shouldn't be telling people this, but like the like race photographer was like, yeah, the second time I did the Arizona Trail, I did the whole thing like microdosing on LSD, and
Wow.
it's like, yeah, it's like a lot, like it helps a lot of people. I
Yeah.
feel like it's really helpful to a lot of people
Yeah.
in a very non-destructive way, which is
Totally.
awesome.
Yeah. Yep. No, I
So I
couldn't agree
recommend
more.
it to everybody to try. I mean, it's like, I really do. Like even like my mom and my aunt, and just I've recommended it to a lot of people. And
Yeah.
like I said, it's pretty low risk. And
Yeah.
it's like the worst thing that's going to happen to you if you like take a little bit too much is like you'll think the sunset is super pretty.
Right.
It's like that's the worst side effect. So
Right. Right. Yeah. 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 I'm sure we could talk longer on this subject, but,
no, yeah,
I
for
do
sure.
find it interesting and interesting that you took it at the beginning of the race. It seems a little nutty to me. Like closer to the end of the race makes more sense, but
Yeah, I actually in hindsight sort of regret not being more like probably not doing that.
yeah.
I kind of wish that I had. Um, but again, I was just that last night was such a blur for me that I was like just moving in and out of weird states of like consciousness
Yeah.
and awakeness and like just hurting bad and wanting to get over. I don't know, like it was. I wish I was more coherent to sort of like take care of myself better or like do those things that like probably would have helped a lot. Like I actually think if I had re-upped on like day 2 and 3, I think that would have helped a lot.
Mm-hmm.
with my attitude mostly.
Yeah,
So
sure.
I was pretty bitchy for a
Mhm.
lot of some of those sections. Like those night sections, like those midnight to 5 a.m. sections were pretty dark out there sometimes. And I think it would have been a really big help if I had been a little bit more proactive with that. But, you know, can't do it perfectly. So
Yeah, yeah.